When people see my life now, the long driveway, the big house, the kind of kitchen that looks like a cooking show set, they assume I grew up rich, that I had a perfect family, and some smooth little childhood, and honestly, I can't even blame them, because nothing about this place suggests kid who got left behind a dead motel with a teddy bear and a lie. But that's where my story really starts, behind an abandoned roadside motel, sitting on cracked asphalt, with a blue teddy in my hands, replaying the last thing my mom said to me. "I'll be right back." Like it was a promise instead of the last line of the last conversation we ever had. I was 6, my legs were numb from the gravel. My stomach was empty. My throat was raw from yelling her name into a parking lot that answered with nothing, and I kept telling myself she must have gotten lost, or the car broke down, or the police pulled her over, because she just left was an answer I didn't know how to live with. By the time the sun went down, the air got cold, and the shadows got long. Cars kept roaring by on the highway without ever turning in. And I remember this moment where I stopped shouting and just listened to how quiet it was around me. And I knew in that particular way, kids know that if anyone came now, it wasn't going to be her. Morning came bright and harsh. My eyes felt swollen. My lips were cracked, and the only thing that still smelled like home was that blue teddy bear pressed to my face, reeking of cigarettes and cheap perfume, but still somehow comforting. That motel was way out there, away from all the noise, the kind of place people use and forget, and the silence had this heavy, abandoned weight to it, until I heard boots crunching on gravel. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't a crowd, just one set of footsteps coming closer, and part of me shot straight up with hope, thinking maybe it was her, but another part of me already knew it wasn't, so I pressed my back to the wall and waited. Through the dust, I saw this tall guy in a gray jacket, maybe late 30s, walking like he wasn't even sure why he'd come around back. And then he saw me and just stopped. He didn't do that annoyed face adults give kids who are in the way. He just frowned, confused and concerned at the same time, then crouched down a few feet away and said, "Whoa. Hey, buddy. What are you doing out here all by yourself?" in this soft voice that didn't match the rough place we were in. In my world, grown-ups meant yelling, grabbing, blaming, so I just held on to the teddy and waited for his tone to change. But it didn't. He kept his hands where I could see them and said, "My name's Grant. I'm not going to hurt you, okay?" I promised, then nodded at the bear and added, "That your friend?" I whispered. Blew first, like it was easier to talk about the bear than myself, and when he asked my name, I finally whispered Eli, and he repeated it carefully, like he was trying it on Eli. "Okay, that's a good name." He looked around that empty lot at the boarded windows and the busted lights, then shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. And something about that, the way he just did it, no big speech, no questions I couldn't answer, cut through all the noise in my head. "How about we get you somewhere safer, Eli?" he said. "Somewhere with food and a roof, and we can call the people who are supposed to help with this stuff. Does that sound okay?" He picked me up like I was something important, not a problem to be dragged, carried me toward a black SUV parked near the road. And when we got there, he did something my old life had not prepared me for. He didn't shove me inside. He opened the back door, stepped back, and said, "Here's the deal. I'm not going to force you if you get in. I take you somewhere safe and we figure this out together, if you stay here." He looked around at the cracked pavement and the empty building. "Well, I don't like that option for you." I stared one last time at the corner of the lot, where my mom's car had disappeared, hugged Blue to my chest until my fingers hurt, and climbed into the back seat, because even at 6, I could tell that whatever was ahead in that car had to be better than whatever was behind. The door closed with a soft click that felt way too final, And for the first time in a long time, final didn't feel like the worst thing in the world. On the drive, that motel shrank to nothing in the rearview mirror, while the outside changed from abandoned buildings to regular houses to big homes with lawns that didn't have a single piece of trash on them. And every few minutes, Grant would glance back and ask, "You doing all right, Eli? You feeling sick, too hot, too cold?" And I didn't have words yet for how weird it felt to have an adult check in on how I felt, instead of how quiet I was. We pulled into this long driveway with trees on both sides, and a house at the end that looked like something off a magazine cover, and my first thought was, oh, I am absolutely not supposed to be here, someone's going to call the cops on me. But Grant parked like it was no big deal. He opened my door, offered his hand again, and said, "You can hold on or not, that's up to you, but either way, Eli, you're not going back to that parking lot." And my hand grabbed his, almost automatically, like some part of me finally believed somebody meant it when they said I wasn't going back. Inside, it smelled like soap and real food, not stale grease and smoke. The floors were smooth and clean, the lights were warm, and I stood there in my dirty clothes feeling like I'd just crashed a movie set. Nobody yelled, nobody asked, "Why is this kid here?" It was just quiet until Grant knelt down to my level and said, "You're safe here, okay? Nobody's going to yell at you, nobody's going to put hands on you. We're going to take this one step at a time." He wrapped a soft blanket around me, handed me a bowl of soup, and said, "Eat as slow as you want. Nobody's taking this away," which might sound simple, but if you grew up around people who weaponized food, you know how wild it is to hear that. I still ate fast because my body didn't trust the words my ears were hearing, and he didn't make a joke or a face, he just watched quietly, registering every shake in my hands. That night, he showed me a small guest room, soft bed, clean sheets, a real lamp, set blue on the pillow, and said, "All right, Eli, this is you and Blue's room tonight, maybe longer, but I need you to hear this. You fall asleep here. You wake up here, nobody is dragging you out of this bed. Nobody is throwing you outside, that's my promise." And something about that sentence lodged itself so deep in me that I can still hear it word for word. I didn't cry because I was convinced if I let go even a little, I'd wake up back at the motel, so I just nodded, got under the blanket fully dressed, and fell asleep listening to a door click softly instead of slam. For the first time in my life, I woke up in the same place I'd fallen asleep. Blue was right where I left him. The room looked exactly the same. Nothing was missing. Nobody was shouting, and breakfast smelled like an actual thing people have every morning, not just a picture on a TV ad. Grant was at the stove like that was just what he did, turned and said, "Morning, Eli, that seat's yours," pointing to a specific chair at the table like I'd always had a place there, and there were eggs and toast and fruit just sitting there waiting, not being held hostage for good behavior. We fell into this strange little routine pretty fast, me testing every boundary, him answering every silent question without pushing. And for a minute, it felt like maybe life had finally decided to cut me a break. Then came the phone call that changed the whole story. I was in the living room playing with a deck of cards when I heard his voice in the office go tighter, heard phrases like, "You're kidding me," and "They did what?" And when he came back, his face looked like someone had dropped a weight on his chest. He sat down across from me and said, "Eli, the police and the social worker went back to that motel, they found some documents, and I want you to hear this from me. You weren't lost out there, you were left on purpose." And even though I'd suspected it, hearing it confirmed felt like the air got sucked out of the room. He told me they had proof my mom and the people she lived with filed reports, saying I was missing, that they'd been collecting money for a lost child, cashing checks, while never lifting a finger to actually find me. And I sat there holding Blue, realizing that on their books, I'd been worth more as a story than as a son. I fell apart in that living room. No brave face, just pure, ugly crying. And he didn't tell me to stop or be strong. He just pulled me in and kept saying, "This is not your fault. What they did says everything about them and nothing about you. You did not make them leave." The next day, a social worker and a detective came to the house, sat on his nice furniture, and started talking about placement and custody while I hid half behind Grant's arm, and they explained that my family had been found, that there would probably be fraud charges, but that technically on paper they still had rights. That's when I heard him say, clear as day, he is not going back there. I don't care how long this takes, I will fight it, and I believed him, because up to that point, he hadn't broken a single promise. A few weeks later, we were in court, sitting across the room from my mother, my stepfather, my grandmother, all dressed up like this was some sad family reunion, instead of a hearing about why they'd left a kid behind a motel. Their lawyer talked a lot about poverty, about confusion, about how overwhelmed they were trying to turn. We left him and cashed the checks into a misunderstanding. The state presented the receipts, the timelines, the video of their car leaving and never coming back. And then the judge looked at me and asked if I wanted to say anything, and before I could think of all the reasons to stay quiet, I found myself standing up there with blue in my hand. I told her what I remembered. My mom saying I'll be right back without making eye contact, the cars on the highway that never turned into the lot, the way the parking lot sounded when I realized nobody was coming. And when she asked where I felt safe now, who tucked me in, who was there when I woke up scared. I looked at my mom for a long second, then at Grant, and I said, with him, I want to stay with him. You could feel the whole courtroom react, just this little shift in the air, and my mom muttered something about him buying me, but she didn't stand up, didn't reach for me, didn't say, please come home. The judge turned to Grant and asked, are you prepared to be this child's guardian long term? And he said, yes, Your Honor. I've already filed to adopt him if the court allows it, and I've changed my will, which is the part that makes everyone sit up a little straighter when they hear this story. He explained that his money had been set to go to distant relatives and business partners, people he barely knew, and that now he'd put the bulk of it into a trust around me and kids like me, that it would take care of me and fund programs for abandoned kids, and that none of it would ever go to the people who left me behind that motel. My mom lost it, shouting that he was buying me. That rich people think they can steal poor kids, and yeah. From the outside, that argument sounds neat and tidy, power versus poverty, but sitting there as the kid in the middle, I didn't feel bought. I felt like someone had finally decided I was worth building a life around. The judge granted him guardianship that day, fast-tracked the adoption, and limited my biological family's contact to whatever a therapist thought wouldn't hurt me, which turned out to be very little, and that's how I ended up with this last name, this house, this life people assume I was born into. Now I'm grown, and I still drive past motels sometimes and feel my chest tighten, still think about those checks, those signatures, that decision to leave and not look back. And people ask me all the time if I'll ever forgive them, ever let them back in, because they're still your family. Everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe that's true in some cases, but I think there's a line where second chance stops being compassion and starts being self-betrayal, you know what I mean? Where forgiveness is more about making other people comfortable than about healing anything in you. For me, the people who share my DNA decided I was worth a teddy bear and a monthly payment, and the man in the gray jacket decided I was worth his time, his name, his will, his peace of mind, and that's not something I can pretend doesn't matter just because we share blood. So I want to hear what you think, because this is where people always get loud in the comments. What makes someone real family in your eyes? Is it blood and last names and matching faces? Or is it the person who shows up when you're sitting in the dirt behind a dead motel and says, You're not staying here, then proves it over and over, even when it costs them something. Do you think I was wrong for letting my biological family face the consequences of what they did for walking out of that courtroom with a new last name and not looking back? Or do you think sometimes closing that door is exactly what it takes to stop the cycle? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you forgive, try to rebuild, or would you have done exactly what I did? And if this story hit you at all, hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear. They're not crazy for wanting more than the family they were born into, because the more we talk about this kind of thing, the harder it gets for people to pretend it doesn't happen.